Hi, welcome back to Down to Earth Mystic. We're going to continue our journey through the tarot cards individually now, card by card, so that you can get an idea of the basic meaning of the cards. However, I do also want to encourage you to intuit your own interpretation based on imagery, based on nudges, whatever it is, whatever your intuition tells you, or sometimes even your logic. They both go hand in hand in reading tarot cards. So in the last video, we talked about an overview of all the cards in general, and in this one, we're going to start with looking at 0 in the major arcana, and we'll end at 4, which is a total of 5 cards because of the 0 in there. But without further ado, I'll dive into showing you each individual card. Stand by just a moment. All right, as promised, here are the cards. So I do want to point out that I do have 3 full cards. This is 3 different decks so that you can see a variety of artistic freedom that comes out. Now keep in mind the Radiant Rider deck is actually definitely recommended by many for beginners because the imagery here is kind of the basis of most imagery in most cards. Now, that being said, some artists get really creative and go off on a tangent or come up with a completely different version of imagery. However, that's their own right to, be creative in their own way of showing you. However, you will still notice that many decks do keep with the same theme. And you're probably looking at these cards and saying, they are not the same. But as I start to point out the similarities, you'll see what I mean. So this is, like I said, the Radiant Rider Waite. This is a Sun and Moon and Tarot deck. And then this one is Crystal Visions Tarot. So with the full here in the Rider Waite, we do see a young person who looks like they may be traveling at the edge of a cliff, about to take a leap of faith. And this dog here does generally represent a loyal companion. Now that you've seen those elements in here and you see that he's about to take a leap of faith, it may make sense that this card can indicate the beginning of a journey, taking a leap of faith to follow your dreams. And then you'll also see in the next card, it's actually pretty similar. There's a guy at the edge of a cliff with a companion. I feel like the sun does indicate a successful journey in following his dreams. Now, this one's a little bit more unique. She is actually also at the edge of a cliff. She doesn't have a companion, but the butterflies here can represent transformation. And so that can be kind of an indicator of change or following your dreams or something of the sort. So that's the Fool card. So 0 card is complete. Now we're moving on to the Magician. And with the Magician, again, you're going to notice a person in the center of the card, kind of the object or the subject of the card. Again, they look different, but you'll start to see what I mean when I bring out the similarities. However, I do want to give an overview. The Magician itself does generally represent the Fool going to the next stage and finding that they actually have internally all that they need to follow their dreams. So you'll also see that the guy in this card has one hand up and one hand down, indicating as above, so below. Something that's also pretty common with the Magician card is seeing somewhere in the card all suits or elements. So you'll see that in this card more obviously with the cup, pentacle, sword, and wands. And we're going to get way more into what the suits are and what they represent later in the more videos when we get to the minor arcana. But just so you know, this is a little bit of a preview that swords, cups, pentacles, and wands are the suits you'll see in the minor arcana, and it does represent all elements. So that being said, we've actually have the elements versus the suits in this card. We've got fire, water, air everywhere, and then earth would be the ground. So again, all suits represented. Now in the Magician and the Crystal Visions Tarot, you're actually going to see, if you look very closely, all the suits again. He's got a wand in this hand, a cup in that hand, pentacle and dagger on his, or I guess you could call that a sword, on his necklace there. And there's also a little bit deeper imagery. So as I'm showing this, you'll see, the more you look, the more that you see. But this magician actually has a cup in his left hand. A cup is generally considered a feminine suit. It does represent intuition. The left side of the body does indicate the femininity or the feminine side. And then the wand here is a masculine suit, and it does represent action and fire and passion and things like that. Again, we'll get way more into that later. I just wanted to point out that you can look at the card and just remember what you've learned that it means, but you can also look deeper and see all of the parts and pieces and kind of intuit what that means for you. So moving on from the Magician, next up is going to be the High Priestess. And so the High Priestess in general does represent a woman. Doesn't have to. Gender is not necessarily as important in tarot cards as it may seem, with the exception of feminine representation is usually more intuition, and masculine is more like power and action and things like that. But in this case, I mean, you can absolutely be a man and be very intuitive. It's just the feminine energy that we all have and the masculine energy that we all have can be embodied in whatever gender you are. And that's why gender in cards isn't really that important. But so a High Priestess is actually someone who's considered very intuitive, and it can also be kind of secretive too. But in general, the Fool has gone from taking a leap of faith to realizing he or she has all that he needs internally, and now the next phase, the third phase or the second card, is indicating tapping into your intuition and finding that I guess kind of an inner balance, but identifying that sometimes getting quiet and being less active can bring to you the answers to your questions more so than if you try to go. So that is the basic of the High Priestess. And next we're going to talk about the Empress. The biggest thing that I feel like is represented in most decks is going to be the fact that the Empress is a mother. It's not obvious in this one and that she's a mother necessarily. There's more elements that you'll see later in the explanation, but in this card the Empress is pregnant, and that card the Empress is pregnant. And so in general, an Empress card can indicate the birth of something new. It doesn't have to mean, oh my gosh, there's a reading that someone's doing for me and the Empress showed up, so I must be pregnant. No, maybe, but not necessarily. The rabbits and the pomegranates can both represent fertility and prosperity. The Venus sign on the heart shield here is indicative of either prosperity or love, because that's what Venus represents. And then just to kind of point it out but not go too deep into it, the Empress does have 12 stars on her crown, which can indicate all 12 zodiacs of astrology. And so you also see pomegranates in the tree here. The staff can kind of indicate someone who is a little more I guess respected, or someone with some type of power, which Empress isn't necessarily powerful, but they actually kind of just exude power in their presence and in how they present themselves visually. They don't necessarily have to express power. But it looks like she's got a kind of a wand or a staff as well. This one is so tiny I can't really see it, but you know, there's a lot of imagery that indicates the birth of something new, or being a mother, or actually being nurturing is another one. So that's it for the Empress. On to the last card for this video. We're going to talk about the Emperor. So the Emperor can be kind of the masculine version of the Empress. Also looks like well respected, has some power, potentially more so I feel like showing in these two cards than this one. The Emperor can indicate someone who is very organized, very grounded in logic, with structure. Can indicate a family man, but in general also, and again, the gender doesn't much matter, but it can just be someone who has a lot of stability about them. The number 4 in general does indicate stability. And then just really briefly back to the Empress, the 3 in general can indicate creativity. So that is it. That is going to be as far as I go into those cards. Again, I want to empower you to empower yourself to understand and see your own interpretation and use your intuition. However, it is helpful to have a little nudge and a little introduction. So any questions at all, please comment below. I'll answer those questions for you, and looking forward to seeing you again in the next video. In the very next video, we'll talk about card 5 through 9. Have a lovely day.